When a young boy told his mother he had a twin brother at school, she laughed it off until he showed her a photo that nearly stopped her heart. What she discovered next would change all of their lives forever. Stick around. This could be the most shocking mystery you've ever heard. And tell us in comments where you're watching from. Tanya Fields had been having the same dream for years. In it, her son Mason ran across a wide open field, laughing with another little boy. The sound of their joy filled the air, but Tanya could never see the other child's face. Just as Mason turned toward her and said, "I want you to meet someone," the dream would vanish, snatched away by morning light. She never knew why it haunted her so deeply. Maybe it was the eeriness, or maybe, in the quiet corners of her heart, she feared it meant something. She never told anyone about the dreams, not even Mason. And then, one spring morning in their modest Savannah apartment, everything changed. That night's dream went further. This time, Mason didn't just smile and point. He walked toward her, holding a photograph in his hand. As he reached out to give it to her, her fingers brushing the edge, she woke up. Tanya sat up in bed, her breath shallow, her chest tight. She could still feel the weight of that photo in her hand, though it had never existed. Not really. She tried to shake it off. Morning routines were calling. She fixed breakfast, packed Mason's lunch, and dropped him off at Willow Creek Elementary. Then she headed to work at a small kiosk in the outlet mall, where she sold phone cases and screen protectors to strangers passing by. But no matter how hard she tried, the dream clung to her, heavy, persistent. That afternoon, Mason climbed into the car, grinning like he had a secret. "Mommy, I have a twin brother at school." Tanya laughed. "A twin? Really? I'm serious," Mason said, eyes wide. "He looks exactly like me." She smiled and shook her head, amused. "You mean you found someone who kind of looks like you?" "No, Mommy," he said firmly. "You'll see." Later that evening, as Tanya cleared the table, Mason came running into the kitchen, phone in hand. "It finally charged," he said, breathless. "I told you. I took pictures." He swiped to one, then held it up proudly. Tanya took the phone from him casually, then stopped cold. In the photo, Mason stood on the playground beside another boy. Tanya's hands trembled as she stared at the photo Mason had just shown her. Two boys stood shoulder to shoulder, grinning for the camera on a sunny playground. One of them was her son. The other was him, too. Same curls, same bright eyes, same birthmark tucked just behind the ear. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't imagination. It was Mason, twice. Her breath caught in her throat. She looked up at her son, who stood beside her with the casual joy of a child who didn't yet understand how impossible this moment really was. "That's Jaden," Mason said. "He's not in my class, but we met at recess. Isn't it cool? It's like I found my twin." Tanya forced a smile. "Yeah, baby, it's cool." But her mind was collapsing inward. Her heart raced. Her fingers went numb. That night, sleep didn't come. Instead, memories did. 7 years ago, she had been rushed into delivery at the county hospital. She was told she was carrying twins. But complications made everything blur together. The lights, the shouting, the cold fear. Then came the words, "I'm sorry," a nurse said flatly. "One of the babies didn't survive." They never showed her the second child. No body, no goodbye, just silence. Then they handed her Mason and sent her home with one car seat. She had buried the pain. She had tried to believe what they told her. But now, after seeing that photo, everything inside her screamed otherwise. The next morning, she didn't go to work. She couldn't. Instead, she drove to Willow Creek Elementary and stood behind the tall black fence near the playground. Her hands clenched the chain links as she scanned the yard. Kids ran, laughed, shouted. Then Mason appeared, and right beside him, Jaden. Tanya's breath left her body. She wasn't seeing double. This wasn't a trick of the eye. Jaden ran like Mason, laughed like Mason, tilted his head when he was curious, just like Mason. They didn't just resemble each other. They were the same. Every instinct in Tanya's body roared. That was her child. He wasn't lost. He wasn't gone. He was alive and standing on the other side of a fence, playing tag. Tanya turned away, overwhelmed. Her chest heaved. Her fingers shook. She had to know the truth. Tanya couldn't sit with it anymore. That afternoon, she walked into the school office with her heart pounding in her chest. Her voice was calm, but her nerves were screaming. "I need to speak with someone," she told the front desk. My son Mason is in second grade. I'm trying to connect with the parents of a boy he's become close with, Jaden. The secretary smiled. Of course, we can get you that information. Minutes later, Tanya left with a name and address. Brent and Olivia Morgan. That evening, she stood outside a neatly manicured home across town, one that looked like it belonged on a magazine cover. She hesitated at the door, feeling completely out of place. She didn't come from wealth or stability. She sold phone cases 6 days a week just to keep the lights on. But she wasn't here for a confrontation. She was here for the truth. With trembling hands, she rang the doorbell. Moments later, the door opened. A tall man in his 40s stepped out first. Yes? Tanya cleared her throat. Hi, my name is Tanya Fields. My son Mason goes to school with your son Jaden. Before Brent could answer, a woman joined him at the doorway. Olivia, warm eyes, cautious smile. Oh, of course. Jaden's told us about a new friend. Please, come in. They invited her in without hesitation, still unsure why she was there. Tanya didn't waste time. She pulled out her phone, opened the photo Mason had shown her, and handed it to them. I think we need to talk. Brent and Olivia looked at the screen and froze. Their faces went pale. Oh my God, Olivia whispered. They're identical. Brent didn't say a word. He just stared. Tanya exhaled shakily and sat on the edge of the armchair. That's Mason, my son, and I believe Jaden might be mine too. The room fell silent. Nobody blinked. Then Tanya spoke again, this time slower, more deliberate. I had twins 7 years ago. The hospital told me only one survived. They never let me see the second baby. They just told me he didn't make it. Tears welled in Olivia's eyes. Tanya went on. When I saw that photo, everything came back. The dream I've had for years, the missing face, the feeling that something was never right. And now, your son has my son's birthmark. Their DNA, it's written all over their faces. Brent leaned forward. We adopted Jaden when he was a baby. It was a private arrangement. A nurse handled everything. We never met the birth mother. She told us the baby's mother couldn't raise him. Tanya's voice cracked. I never gave him up. Nobody moved. Nobody denied it. They just sat there, 3 broken adults wrapped in a truth none of them had been prepared for. I need to know, Tanya whispered. Please, can we do a DNA test? Brent looked at Olivia, and Olivia, her face streaked with tears, nodded. Yes, she said. We need to know too. The days that followed felt endless. Tanya barely slept. Her stomach twisted every time her phone buzzed. She checked her email hourly, waiting for the lab to send the DNA results. Brent and Olivia kept in touch the entire time. They weren't cold. They weren't defensive. In fact, they seemed just as anxious as she was. The 3 of them had made a decision together to face whatever the truth would be, no matter how painful it turned out. Meanwhile, Mason and Jaden played together every afternoon, unaware of the storm quietly swirling around them. They laughed, told silly jokes, drew comic books together on the floor. They looked like brothers, but more than that, they felt like brothers. Tanya watched them from the kitchen table one evening. Her eyes brimmed with tears. She didn't need a lab to tell her what her heart already knew. Still, she waited until the day finally came. The 3 of them, Tanya, Brent, and Olivia, met at a small family clinic just outside the city. They sat in a sterile office, hearts pounding, while the nurse handed the sealed envelope to the doctor. He opened it, skimmed the page, then looked up. The results confirm it, he said gently. Jaden and Mason are identical twins. Miss Fields, you are the biological mother of both boys. Tanya covered her mouth, the weight of the truth crashing down on her in one powerful wave. Tears streamed down her face. Brent and Olivia sat in stunned silence until Olivia slowly reached out and took Tanya's hand. I don't know how this happened, Olivia whispered, her voice shaking. But if what you're saying about the hospital is true, then you were lied to. And we had no idea. Tanya nodded through tears. I believe you. I don't want to take Jaden away. I want to be in his life. I need to know my son. Brent, still absorbing the truth, finally spoke. You should be. He deserves to know you, and they deserve each other. 3 strangers, bound by a painful miracle, sat in that room, quiet, crying, holding hands, and made a silent promise. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. The DNA test had answered the question. Now came the harder one. Why? Why had Tanya been told her son was dead? Who made that decision? Who profited from that lie? Brent and Olivia were just as unsettled. They had built their entire lives around Jaden, loved him deeply, and now realized their adoption may have started with a crime. Tanya didn't want revenge. She wanted answers. Together, the three hired a private investigator. His name wasn't important, only what he would find. And what he found was worse than they imagined. The nurse who had handled Jaden's adoption was no longer in the country. She had vanished just months after Tanya's delivery. No forwarding address, no paper trail. But she wasn't a ghost. Her name had surfaced in several suspicious reports, cases where mothers, often poor or alone, were told their babies hadn't survived, only for those babies to be placed in quiet, off-the-books adoptions. It was part of a pattern. She'd been exploiting desperate families on both sides, selling newborns to well-meaning couples who never knew they were part of something illegal. Tanya's case was one of many. And the hospital? They'd quietly fired her. No investigation, no report, no accountability, just silence. Tanya sat across from Brent and Olivia as the investigator delivered his findings. Her hands were clenched tightly in her lap. "So this wasn't an accident," she whispered. "Someone stole my baby." Brent ran a hand over his face. "And we paid for that." Olivia wiped her eyes, her voice cracking. "We didn't know. But that doesn't make it okay." Tanya looked at her. "I believe you. I don't blame you. But I will speak out. There are other mothers out there who may never know what really happened to their children." The Morgans nodded. They weren't just on her side now. They were part of the fight. With the truth finally out, Tanya had a choice to make. She could pursue legal action. She could sue the hospital. She could fight to reclaim what was stolen. But when she looked at Jaden, laughing beside Mason, their bond natural and immediate, she knew what mattered most. Not vengeance. Family. Tanya sat down with Brent and Olivia in their living room one evening. There were no lawyers, no tension, just three parents doing what none of them had expected to do, plan a future together. "I'm not here to take him away from you," Tanya said. "He's your son too. You raised him with love. I see that." Olivia nodded, tears in her eyes. "But he's yours too. We want him to know you, not as a guest, not as a secret, as family." It wasn't easy. There were painful conversations, emotional days, questions from the boys, but somehow it worked. They began slowly, weekend visits, shared playdates, family outings, then birthdays celebrated together. Tanya, Brent, and Olivia created something rare, a family built not on paperwork, but on honesty, trust, and love. The years passed, but the photo that shattered Tanya's world never lost its meaning. She still kept it framed by her bedside, not as a reminder of pain, but of what love had reclaimed. It was the moment everything changed, the moment she saw both of her sons for the first time. Mason and Jaden grew stronger together with each passing year. The bond between them defied logic. They moved alike, laughed alike. They could sense when the other was upset. They weren't just brothers. They were halves of the same whole. At school, they became known as the Miracle Twins. Their story touched classmates, teachers, and strangers alike. People saw something extraordinary in them, something rare, something real. And behind it all were three parents who chose unity over ego, love over ownership. Tanya never stopped speaking out. Though the nurse who stole her child was never caught, Tanya made sure the story didn't vanish like the woman had. Her voice, once quiet, now carried weight. She helped push through new hospital protocols. She consulted on policies that would make it harder for mothers to be silenced again. She became a symbol, not just of survival, but of reclamation. And yet, she stayed grounded in what mattered most. On a rainy evening, years later, Tanya sat at the dinner table with Brent, Olivia, Mason, and Jaden, now both teenagers, arguing over who ate the last slice of pizza. She smiled through quiet tears. Once, she had thought she'd lost her child forever. Now, he sat across from her, laughing with his brother, whole and loved. She didn't just get her son back. She gained a family. And for the first time in her life, she had peace. Sometimes, life brings us answers in the most unexpected ways. A photo, a dream, a child's innocent words. Tanya's journey wasn't just about uncovering a hidden truth. It was about reclaiming what was stolen and building something even stronger in its place. She could have chosen anger. She could have shut the door. But instead, she opened her heart, and in doing so, changed the lives of everyone around her. What would you have done in Tanya's shoes? Would you have fought for the past, or chosen to protect the future? Let us know in the comments. Your thoughts matter more than you know. If this story moved you, we invite you to subscribe, like, and share it with someone who believes in the power of truth and love. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next heart-touching story.